I should probably preface this video by saying I've had the most pain and suffering I've ever had creating a test program to demonstrate a video with this, and it's somewhat reflected, although not completely reflected, with all the gotchas I have at the end of this document. But basically what we're talking about today is the web client download string method. And in order to use web client, you need to reference the system.net namespace. So you need using system.net namespace at the top of the program. And then you instantiate the web client the usual way with web client some name. I'm using WC equals new web client and parents. And then in order to use the download string method, you just use the dot operator with the wc.downloadString, and this returns a string, and it takes a parameter that's the fully qualified URL with the text file of some type. And the gotchas are horrendous. For one thing, you can't use a dot in the file name because that'll screw up the URL. It'll actually break it up into a space for some reason, and then you'll get a 404 error that it can't find the website. And then another gotcha is that the download string doesn't handle new lines correctly. And I experimented with using both the Unix and the DOS type new lines and all kinds of experiments, and it never worked correctly. So what you've got to do is use the split string manipulation to break the text up into lines and insert your own environment.newline if you're writing it to a text box the way we are in this program. And also with the split, what you want to split on is the /x0a, which is the hexadecimal code for line feed, because DOS uses carriage return line feed and Unix uses just line feed. So if you use a /n, for instance, it may or may not work, to use the split. So this will become more clear when you start looking at the code. And I have a file that shows these characters somewhat. The line feed is used in Unix, Multics, and other Unix-like systems, Mac OS, and so on. And the carriage return plus line feed is used in Microsoft Windows and a whole list of other operating systems. Originally started with DOS. When I started programming, when I started programming, I was using an Apple II on a PC. So I was using Apple DOS, but when the IBM finally came out with their PC, I started using DOS. And then the line feed character, as I said, is /x0a, and the carriage return character is /x0d. So if you can specify the line feed as just a character delimited by single quotes, but if you wanted to really specify the carriage return line feed, you'd need the double quotes of a string, and then it'd be /x0d /x0a. So to get back to the innumerable gotchas, you always want to use a try-catch block around the download string code to catch unexpected internet problems like the link being down, or the server you're referencing being down, or even your local TCP/IP stack on your computer being messed up. And one way that can be messed up is by continually experimenting with this program and running it over and over again. And if it does get messed up, the best thing to do is just reboot your computer, which will reinitialize everything, including the TCP/IP stack. Well, another question might be, how do you get a text file out on the internet to begin with? And probably if you're realistically doing it, you probably have a file that's writing it out there, like it's a status log or something. So you have an HTML file that's actually writing a text file out. But if you want to just do it in terms of doing a test like this, you want to use some kind of FTP client. Like I'm using IP switched WS FTP Professional, and usually your site providers have some web-based FTP client you can use, and if you're at the public library or something, that's useful, but generally speaking it's kind of awkward and doesn't work that well, so it's better to use something like this. And then usually to connect you have predefined profiles, like my profile for Cyborg Mega's C# Edge is here, and that's where I put the test program. If we go to the test directory, both on my local copy of the website and my remote copy of the website, we see on the remote copy, which is public_html/test, and of course qualified by my URL. If we just drag this file over, notice it gives you a nice sound and it tells you it finished copying over that file. If you actually go to my website, which aside from noticing it's a work of art with all these great tabs and everything and programs, and the index very useful, and all the source code and so on, and then you can see what the source code is if you put your cursor over the number and so on. And but the one thing you don't see here is the directory test. So if we go up here and change this to test and hit enter, what you see is an index of the subdirectory text I created, and the Wolfman-text file that we uploaded using FTP. The program I'm using to test the download string is just a form with a multi-line text box and a button that says download string. And if we double click on the download string button, you see the event handler. First of all, you have the using system.net specified, so we can use web client at all. And then in the event handler for the button, I instantiate the web client in the usual way. I call it WC. And then, as specified in the gotchas, I use a try and a catch, because there's a million things that can happen that cause this not to work. I know from experience. And then I define within the try block a local block scope local variable called mess, appropriately named mess. And I do an assignment to the mess variable from WC download string, and I specify the URL of the file we uploaded previously. That's the Wolfman_text file, and this is the URL of my website, and then it's qualified by a test subdirectory. And you notice there's a public_HTML that's actually the directory you upload to, but you don't specify that in the URL string, because that's totally transparent. You know, it's not part of the way you actually reference files. You reference files like subdirectories under that, but you don't reference that directly. And then I do a split on the message based on the hex 0A, which is our safe line split thing. And I put I create an array of strings called tokens. Then I use a for each to loop through the tokens and put it in a string variable called token on each iteration. And then I use the append text on the text box to write out the current entry in the token array, plus environment.newLine variable. So we'll have each of the lines in the text file on an actual new line in the text box. And that's the try block, and then I have the catch block after the try block that does an exception named EX to catch the exception. and this just has a message box.show in it that shows the ex.message to display whatever message we got when we got the exception. If we look at the file we copied over using an editor on the local system, I'll just right click. I can't just double click because it's not .text, it's -text. But if I open it with, if I can find it, Notepad, you see it says, even a man who is pure in heart and says his prayers by night can become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the moon is full and bright. So right now the clear internet is down. My router and my Wi-Fi are both saying it's connected, but it's not working because the clear internet itself is down. I know because I've called them up before and they tell me that. So let's see what kind of error we get if we click on the download string under these circumstances. We get unable to connect to the remote server. Well, let's try running this program when hopefully there's no error conditions. I click the download string button. You see we get even a man who is pure in heart and says his prayers by night, and so on. If I sort of artificially create a error condition by commenting this out and then uncommenting this out, which is a totally bogus URL, and then compile and run this. See, I get the exception thrown. The remote name could not be resolved. Prog underscore or grog underscore puck. Well, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and learned a lot. And if you appreciate all the pain and suffering I went to bring it to you, please subscribe and click on any of the ad videos that you see bannered on the screen, assuming they're relevant for you, or even if they're not relevant for you, I won't tell anyone. Until the next tutorial, I'll see you then.